All right, welcome H Radio 223 part-timers to your second class. For the week, we're going to do two classes, covering two classes or lessons this week. They are quite lengthy, but we want to also stay on track. So let's get into it. We're continuing with storytelling, with being on air and creating content. So this comes from Geller's book, Beyond Powerful Radio. The New York Focal Press version was published by New York Focal Press, chapter 17, all the way out there on page 193 to 206. Okay, so what I'm going to do throughout this lesson is I've decided to focus on some broadcasts by Paul Harvey. There is obviously a slide here that introduces you to the storytelling of master storyteller Paul Harvey, and we're going to listen and we're going to listen. Excuse me, we're going to listen, and you're going to read further why this man in particular should be spotlighted as a great storyteller. Right. Do also note that you have two links there that you can go over, look at, and read more about Paul himself. But I thought to start off a lesson, let's listen to one of his shorter, okay, just on the shorter intros to Paul Harvey. Let me just get to the YouTube video. But as you might see here, there'll be two YouTube videos that I'm going to play. But this in particular is one of the just one of the stories online. Storytellers study the master Paul Harvey. Right, Paul Harvey obviously worked in like a time be known to us. In other words, just the olden times, right? Very good, great, very talented presenter. But here is a very short 4-minute clip on Paul Harvey and the way that he constructs, and again, the way he controls himself in a particular, obviously, like show. Have a listen. Well,
Now, the rest of the story. Remember these 4 words: Al was utterly useless. Al was utterly useless. I'm nothing but a burden on my family, he once told his sister in a letter. Really, it would have been better if I had never been born. Al had hit bottom by the age of 22. His parents, impoverished, were no longer able to support him. He needed a job, but nobody would hire him. In desperation, Al appealed to an old school friend, a fellow whose class notes he used to copy. The friend's father had government connections, and a few days later, Al was being interviewed for a position at the Federal Patent Office. Fred Haller was then director of the agency. He would conduct the interview personally. Haller informed the young man that he needed personnel capable of judging whether a request for a patent had any justification. What do you know about patents? The director asked, and Al replied, nothing. Nothing at all. The director blinked a couple of times. Ordinarily, he would have terminated the interview then and there, and yet there was something intriguing in the young man's frankness. Tell me a bit about yourself, the director asked, and Al forced a smile. What was there to tell? He'd been thrown out of high school at 15. With no high school diploma, college was out of the question. So he applied at a technical school, but then he flunked his first entrance exam. So he went back to high school, a different high school, actually because his old high school refused to readmit him. Now this time he graduated. He was even accepted thereafter at technical school, but when prospective employers subsequently discovered that he had cut classes chronically and that he had passed exams only narrowly and had treated professors irreverently, well, nobody would hire him. Nobody would hire him. And now here he was in the Federal Patent Office asking for a job for which he was not qualified. What kind of a loser could summon up that kind of nerve? But Director Haller was not so certain. Yes, he had heard all of the reasons why he should not hire Al, But what he wanted to hear now were all of the reasons why he should. You know what? That interview continued for most of 2 hours, and by the time it was over, the director had come to this conclusion. Al was not stupid. He was simply a failure. If he were ever to stop failing and make something of himself, he would first require a large dose of self-confidence. So Director Haller decided to give Al a break, a probationary job as technical expert third class. You see, though posterity's impression of Al is larger than life, he was not destined to guide lesser minds through space and time. In fact, at 22, he stood at the brink of utter obscurity, and then he got that job at the Swiss Federal Patent Office. And inspired by his very first unequivocal success, he eventually learned to live up to his best, his very best, and to become the groundbreaking genius the world now knows as Albert Einstein. Mm-hmm. Only now you know the rest of the story.
Right. Very cool, right? And in so many ways, again, obviously well scripted. I'm saying to you, the scripting for that, the copy for that is one to, and remember back in the time, again, I mean, this guy was on air for over 50 years, so we're talking again we're looking at the 60s, 50s, or 60s, 70s specifically, would be a particular high mark, or like a high within this man's career. And again, also, I mean, just the way that, again, it's about these escalated feelings of like anticipation. We're like, oh, like what's he going to say next? He's clearly moving somewhere, and that's great storytelling. Really, as you're listening to the story, you're moving bit by bit by bit. The whole story was what, 3 minutes 47 seconds? That's crazy, right? And we always say to you, like, speak for a link that's about 3.5 minutes time. It's more than enough time for one person to actually put something nice and very very powerful, short and concise together. But again, that also that kind of that declaration of confidence that he has over the story that he is telling, and boom, damn, with the punchline there. That obviously it was Adam. I'm not Adam. I was going to say Adam Levine. Albert Einstein. All right. So Paul Harvey has his voice filled the radio waves for over 50 years. He's most famous for a show called The Rest of the Story, which is what you saw an excerpt on here, or what you just heard an excerpt on, where he'd tell a story of a famous person or event, being careful to obscure details that might identify either. If you were thinking about who it was, who's this person, and man, what a horrible way for this person to have gone through these experiences, right? The audience would listen in anticipation, knowing that Harvey was setting them up to reveal something really delightful, a secret at the end that tied everything together. Great storytelling, right? Great way to start this particular lecture as well. And again, we will go and explore more of Paul's talents, right, as we move along. All right, so picture this. You turn your car about to leave work, and you switch your favorite radio station on as you do every day. Put the volume a bit louder for background noise while you drive. And suddenly you pause, put the sound louder, put your car in neutral, and lean back in your car. And for a moment, you don't care whether you'll be late for work because you're so captivated by a story that's being told on radio. And that's happened to me a few times. I keep saying this one stood out for me because it was quite consistent when I was younger. I think it was when I was 19. Um, Penny Libiani's show on Metro FM would do this to me because it was the same time that I'd finished varsity. I'd come home, obviously stayed with my parents, and close by was it was a Planet Fitness, right? That I would go to gym at, a couple of times a week, right? But the thing is that I would, because I mean, Jim can wait. Jim can wait. If there was something great on radio, which Penny was, And just Penny is she's such a beast, and she's such a legend. I would stay in that car for perhaps sometimes about 40 minutes more, just to listen to more of that conversation that she was having, because she would do some really compelling interviews. And you know Penny's personality, it's that demanding, powerful, just just beautiful, you know. I'm saying radio personality, and what a obviously just again what a pioneer for me in my era. You know, someone that just really I looked up to as a kid, as a kid professional. You know, all right. So that's really what you want to get, that kind of that stay in your car effect, right? And human beings love stories, so we learn through them from the time and that we are kids. Again, another just like my all-time favorite storyteller ever was my mom, and is my mom. My mom still tells great stories, but you know, just as a kid, you know, and I always revisit this particular one because again, she did it every single day for me. When I was about 3, 4 years old, we'd have an like a fruit and veg shop down in the orchards where my parents still stayed. That's where we grew up, right? So, and so every lunchtime, around about 11, 12 o'clock, I'm guessing that's probably time when kids have their naps or whatever it is. I don't know much about kids at the moment, but my mother, we're Greek and we obviously very proud of our heritage. And the only stories that she actually knew, because her parents who were not from what I understand great, say like fascinating, or fascinated with the fascinating, right? Very pragmatic. You know, they were farmers. Um, Anyway, the only story they didn't tell stories about Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and all these like very westernized, saying like that, like, kind of like English, Nordic, Dutch, you know, origin stories of the where these are stories are originated, right? Anyway, point is, my mom would put me to bed there in the shop, you know, just under the counter. There was this great little apartment, like little compartment for me where my little pillow was at, my little blanket was at, and little Chris was very tiny little child would go and sleep. But before that, she would always tell me like this great story about Greek mythology, you know. So you know, battles and Hydra. I love the monsters, loved the monsters. You know, Hydra was one of my favorite, Medusa. And she would also tell me about the massive battles that the Greeks would go and fight and win, you know, because they were quite a strong nation back in the ancient days, right? And she would know them off by heart, you know, as if it was told to her, like it was told to her when she was a child, because that's what obviously my grandparents would talk about, not as reality, it's mythology at the end of the day. But it was genuinely, it still remains one of the best moments of my life, just because that connection that me and my mother had, you know, through those moments. I will, I remember everything, every single bit of those moments. And that was what a good storyteller does. You know, really connects, makes you remember, makes you feel something, makes you love something, you know. And I know that you know one of your own favorite storytellers, and there could be quite a few in your family. There could be quite a few in your friend circle, and maybe you are that person that tells great stories very naturally. Try and obviously think of these people and what are the traits that make them great storytellers at the end of the day. See whether or not maybe they tick some of the boxes off that we are going to cover in this particular lesson. Storytelling is one of the key points in proven creative, powerful radio. So, focus, engage, opinion, position, and storytelling. Then there are those who are naturally powerful storytellers, like I said, like my mom. Um, but the craft of storytelling is a skill that can actually be taught. That's why we do teach about structure and we teach you about specifically storytelling on radio and in different mediums. I'm sure that within TV and video, you've been taught how to tell the story there, even in print and whatever it is, while you're busy with your subjects there. It's important for us as media practitioners to know exactly what the structure, like so the skill set that we are applying to what we are creating here follows a certain again, as I say, a component structure, right? Right, but the craft of storytelling, right, like I say, can be taught, and here we are, we're busy teaching it here. Because nearly everyone has access to media and technology, it is your well owned, right, ability, right, or honed, should I say, well honed ability to tell stories that will allow you to get an audience and to keep that audience's attention. And good storytellers will absolutely rule on the airwaves, So when you know your favorite, you can just immediately associate your favorite radio presenter with being a great storyteller because that's just it comes part and parcel. Whatever medium that you're going to use, as I said there at the previous one, so it could be digital, it could be print, it could be TV, it could be whatever it is, right? Okay, any medium. If it's not a good story, it's not going to get attention. It's going to be boring. Like we don't want to listen to boring stories. We don't watch boring people. Whenever you want to be a broadcaster, commentator of any kind, your job likely involves, at the end of the day, some story to be told at any one given point. Okay, so storytelling trainer and consultant Jeffrey Hedquist says the following: everyone, parents, teachers, managers, journalists, salespeople, advertising, marketing executives, entertainers, all use stories. We either do it haphazardly or with skill and effectiveness. So you can use this inherent powerful tribal communication skill to your advantage to influence, motivate, educate, sell, and entertain your audience so that you must know that you're a human being that wants to tell people like share experiences with other people like we do often go through life and feel like that we are complete islands of information that we don't need anybody else. We don't want to be in conversation with other people because they're not invested, they're not great people to talk to, they're not interested in my stories, and perhaps maybe I don't really know maybe just yet how to communicate and connect with other people. But I know that everybody wants to be heard, in some or other way. So storytelling has been here obviously since the beginning of humankind, right? It's the way that you tell the story using your own personality and tailoring it to your audience. So that's two very important things, right? So the story is one thing, your skill set is another. So knowing how to tell a good story, right? Your personality, how you bringing that in, how you making the characters come alive, how again, you've constructed it in such a way that it becomes like, almost people want to like give you a round of applause after that happens, right? Excuse me, and tailoring it to your audience, so that specific audience. If it's kids, like you're going to tell a story very differently than you are when you're telling it to a bunch of adults, right? When it's your best friend, no, in comparison to, let's say, if you've got to go and you're going to a convention and you're giving an inspirational or an educational or a business talk, whatever it is, storytelling is going to be different as well. Audiences connect to and respond to stories that reflect the basic themes of human nature, good and evil, right and wrong, humor, love stories, the ridiculous, life is absurd, and you know that, right? And triumph against odds. So we all know, man, the story of David and Goliath, right? So taking down the giant, and with what? Man, just with one stone, right? With what was that? It wasn't a slingshot. It was the thing that he, I don't know. It's not a slingshot. It was, I don't know the word for it, but anyway, that piece of material that they would use specifically catered for. It was also, I think, hunting at that particular point. But anyway, David and Goliath, throwing down that giant. It was a great story because also we know that Goliath was such an arrogant piece of work, right? you know, I quite enjoyed that story in particular. Stories that show character and are hopeful and teach, inspire, and move people forward, right? Throughout this lesson, we will be looking at a number of, well, like I say, just these tips and strategies or whatever it is, approaches that you can apply yourself to telling a good story. So Tommy Kramer's 6 steps to telling a great story, right? Well, Tommy says it looks easy and everybody talks about storytelling on the air, but only a small piece or percentage of people on air know how to be compelling when they open that microphone. And we know this, we've said this before, and we know exactly what we need to do. And you have been exposed to that. So I know by now that you know you're getting ready to understand that if I put you in studio, put you behind the mic, like all these things need to apply, right? So but the good news is that you don't have to be a born storyteller. It can be taught, as you said, at the core, a story is simple, a simple premise or situation that leads to something surprising, like some kind of resolution, right? Which is now you can start seeing how the construct of, for example, one of the ways that we tell the story is with the hook, the crumbs, the dress up, the payoff, and the blackout, right? We also had the promise and the performance. We also had I think there was that, the one that I do not like, I must say, it's the glum and the this and that. Ooh, that one's not a great, um, for me personally, not a great one. Just, I think it's just I think someone is just trying a little bit too hard with that one. But we have so many again ways. Begin, middle, and end. Right at the end of the day, knowing all your skills and your application of them, a beginning, middle, and end is also good enough to tell a story. Most people, most real people, should I say? Excuse me. What makes the average person a poor storyteller is that there's no resolution. Man, now you've left us hanging. If you look at a movie, um, it's something I learned while I was busy learning screenwriting, right? Is that within the first 5 to 7 minutes, right, maybe 5 to 10 minutes in a movie, a director or a storyteller, or the writer of that particular script or whatever it may be, right? But the director, we blame the director because that's the person in charge, right? The director should make a deal with you. So what happens is with that deal is that while watching those first 10 minutes, it's not that you don't know the ending, but you can kind of you expect to know what that ending is going to be, right? So it's a promise, right? They make a promise with you. And if you get to the end of the movie and it, that promise was actually not fulfilled, right? The movie 10 to 1 is a bad movie. It was badly scripted. It was confusing, it was vague, it was a joke, it was rubbish. Nah, rubbish. Never mind what happened in between. But that is the primary litmus test for telling whether a movie is good or not. And the same thing does actually apply here. If you don't have any end to some point to your story, what was the whole point of taking us through it, right? Most people, including guests and callers to the show, can't tell stories. They have to sort of be tricked into it by us. It is. We go and we give them triggers. We trigger them to tell us the best parts of that story, and we are the ones that we move them along. We carry them along for that particular journey, right? So let's get into the steps. One, start with the ending, right? Why do we start with the ending? So we know where we're going. Start with the ending, then work your way back from there. Unless you know where you're going, you're going to be more likely wandering off and kind of waffling and really not knowing what you're doing. And you can prep for hours and hours and not know what it is exactly that you want to say. So if you remember the ending, again, you can obviously also, we know that you can go and just kind of polish that ending up and fix it. I'm saying along the way as you are preparing that particular piece. But it definitely gives you direction and motive, right? So some kind of active motive to go out and say, this is exactly what I want to be pushing to different elements throughout my particular link. So remembering that ending needs to be something that we haven't heard before, right? It needs to have that surprise factor, and again, surprise factor in saying that, listen, yeah, like this is where I would like you to learn something, to think about something, to change your mind, something like share your experiences. Let's talk about it, right? And then obviously the end of that piece, right? That particular bit where we want that person leaving that particular moment in our show saying, "Oh, that was a great experience," just like the movie, right? The beginning comes next because obviously we want to be able to work in a very knowledgeable direction, right? So it comes next in the prep process, because without a compelling opening thought like the hook, right? No one's ever going to stick around for the ending. And the middle part is about editing. You can take one step away from the main road, but then come back. Second one of Tommy Kramer's six steps to great storytelling. Put yourself last. So, in other words, start broadly, right? We want to start broadly, so we invite the listener to conversation, and then we can bring in our opinions. Then we can actually talk about like how we view something, how we experience something, but move back to the content and always at the same time, right? But open broadly. This is about the listener. Start with the subject, or start by referencing the listener. Never be typical. So say what only you would say about a subject. If someone else would say it, automatically reject it. Right? Be fresh. Be new. Have an angle. Have two angles. Right? Use real language and don't be hoity-toity about it, right? Because I'm trying to use my own normal language over here, real language that people do understand, that you understand, that they understand. At the end of the day, when you get a presentation null instead of conversation null, you've lost the listener uh, altogether. A lot of people go on air and have this weird. It's an automatic reaction where you just go on and you speak funny and you speak weird. Like you think everything needs to sound so incredibly colloquial. Like I say, as I said, very, very, very high-end English, and it doesn't make sense, right? Because that's also not the way that you talk at the end of the day. We do say push your skill because you want to be a polished professional, but like this type of talking doesn't actually resonate well with anyone. Don't read to me. We know that, right? Unless it's a quote that you wanna share, you're going to obviously disclaim that listen here, this person has said the following from this book. These are the three main points that you should know about whatever, right? But the rest you've got to obviously be able to be conversational and be able to kind of reprocess, reparaphrase, and then obviously deliver something that is talking to a person, not at a person. Find another camera angle. So this is the best thing you'll ever learn. When a great form director walks around watching the actors rehearse, he constantly thinks, who do I show in this particular shot? So for you, you want to be able to find a different angle, right? Very important. Yeah. So Tommy Craner, excuse me, Kramer, Craner. I'm renaming this guy. I'm rebirthing him. How's the camera angle thing work? Picture a parade. So most people in radio describe things from the judge's booth. They're watching the floats go by. This is both typical and it's very boring. But can you imagine if you were in the parade itself? Another great way is also trying to think of, and this is something that I saw when who got married? I think it was Prince William. Was it Prince William? It's been Prince William, right? That got married, right? But it was a massive deal. Yes, I was alive when I think I was alive. Was I alive when uh Diana was married? I think I was. Anyway, the point is, but I specifically remember the royal wedding of William. But the thing is that everybody was there. Okay, obviously the English people. But the thing is that Twitter had just come out. And the thing is that what was really great, because obviously as someone that's watching from home, is that you're just watching whatever the screen shows you and whatever obviously like the news is covering. But if you had been on Twitter, that so back then obviously it was called Twitter, like you could see a play by play by play. It was full, man. If this person's seen this person's recorded this, this person said this, and you got this really like five, six, seventh dimension, multi-dimensional, right? View of this great massive event, obviously, right? And as just as a like a from that I want to point out that there's so many different ways that you can go and approach something. Like think of those hundreds of thousands of people that had a different point of view to one particular event that everyone was sharing anyway, right? I'm saying sharing as people, that you yourself as a presenter and a broadcaster can have multiple angles, right, to give a fresher perspective on content and on shows. Use different vantage points, right? So each different vantage point gives you a completely different view of the same event. The better and more adept you are or you become at seeing different camera angles, the more interesting and engaging like you're going to be as well on air as well. You need to know that you can't be one-sided, that you also don't want to be one-sided. It's just vanilla carbon copy of someone that we've met a million times, heard a million times, and has said things a million times over, right? You want to be able to be someone that people are once again interested in and is interesting, right? Okay. Um, so there's at least one major way in which storytelling to a radio, TV podcast, or an internet audience differs from the kind of storytelling you might be around a dinner table doing. Dinner table, it's considered very rude to leave if you are bored. I fully agree. I agree. But if you have not given your audience a reason to stand here or stay here, I'm saying at your show, they can leave whenever they want. So it's important to put a few essential things up front, right? So if you are telling a story outside of breaking news, it's necessary to immediately engage and captivate your listener, right? So as with anything you put on air, ask why you should ask why should someone actually want to listen to you, and then go and answer that particular question, and then go create your content over there, and then obviously deliver right answering that question still. Give the reason someone should listen to your story before you do anything else. All right, so let's just quickly close up here with Tommy Kramer, and then I want to go to another clip of Paul. So here's an example. So if you've ever wondered whether you're really alone in the dressing room when you try on clothes, which we all have, because we all think there's a security camera, which I think is there. You see, even I'm still interested, right? You want to know about the secret guard who's going to jail today? How to find the reason before any story goes on air. Take it apart, look at the facts, try to see it from all angles. Who are the players involved? In this case, it would be the department store, the person that's watching you, that they're actually not allowed watching. You're not allowed watching people in, like you aren't allowed watching someone go to the bathroom, right? It's disgusting, one, but also it's illegal, right? It's just a place of privacy. It's a boundary of privacy you may not cross, right? But we might be looking at people that are doing like stealing or maybe funny things that they do in a dressing room or whatever it is. We might look at looking at talking to the people who give you those little tags there. The like it's, call them the dressing room officers. So and they give you like the number 4, 5, or whatever it is, and you're not that you're scared of them, but it's like they're an authority figure. I can't enter the dressing room without their permission, right? Anyway, there's many different players that are involved just in this one particular story. How can you make your listeners care about them? Who will be affected by the outcome of what you have to say, and answer at least one of these questions and put it right up front. Okay. We're going to look through this prism method of storytelling as well in just a moment. I do want to just take a quick break, excuse me, to go and play another piece on Blink. Here we go. There wasn't this one. Which one was it? Oh, this one here.
The rest of the story. 12-year-old Randy was lying on the kitchen floor, shuddering and flailing, his eyes rolled back. It was supposed to be a case of petit mal epilepsy that Randy had, a mild one, but as Mama Ruth gazed down in horror, she realized this was something more. Nervously, she glanced out the kitchen window. The snowflakes were big as teacups. The wind was picking up, a blizzard was brewing, and Randy, oblivious in his seizure, kept flailing. Somewhere, Mama Ruth had heard of a home remedy for such emergencies. A thimbleful of laundry bluing, she spilled it into the boy's mouth with no result. She turned to 8-year-old James, clutching him at the shoulders. This was very important, she told him, as calmly as she could. He must put on his snowshoes and run to Mr. Fortelka's store and ask somebody to call the doctor. Well, James, eyes wide, nodded quickly, scrambled for the door. Glancing back at Randy, he could see the blue liquid trickling from his lips. A moment later, James was gone, dashing out across the farm fields through knee-deep snow, praying that Randy would be all right. The two had been reared as brothers. No one was closer to James than Randy, and now, for all the little boy knew, he was the only thing that stood between his best friend and death. It was a mile to Mr. Fortelka's store. When James got there, he tried to explain that Randy was sick, maybe even dying, needed a doctor right away. He tried, but the words would not come out. All that would come out of James was a straining sound, as though the words were piling up behind a locked door, trying to batter their way out, but they could not. Mr. Fortelka, bewildered, nonetheless knew the matter with James. The child was a stutterer. He had stuttered ever since the family moved to Michigan. In fact, he had begun to withdraw on account of his impediment. Had been all but completely mute for years. In school, the teachers accommodated him. Classmates, remarkably tolerant, did not even laugh. But meanwhile, on that snowy evening at Mr. Fortelka's store, inside James himself, a war was waging, a battle between what he knew he must say and whatever it was that prevented him from saying it. And then, finally, the words won, and painfully, one at a time, they struggled into the light, combining to comprise the all-important message that Randy is sick, called the doctor. Mr. Fortelka called the doctor. Randy got the right medicine. He did recover. But for James, the stutter stayed. Even after emerging from his cocoon of virtual silence several years later, he continued to speak with great difficulty. And unless he's cautious in his utterances, he stutters to this day. Although you would never imagine such a thing. For the child who spent his childhood at a loss for words, one day was to earn his living with words, and thus did he make the world forget that interminable time when mere talking was all but impossible. For you know the once-tied tongue as an articulate and precise machine accompanying a golden, inimitable voice, a sorcerer conjuring all manner of imagery with immaculate diction, a magnificent instrument which for 4 decades has wrought everything from Shakespeare to Darth Vader. For its master, the master of the words, the master you know as James Earl Jones.
Wow.
Only now you know the rest of the story.
Oh, that's so cool. I love James Earl Jones. Love it. So cool. I didn't know that. That's very cool. I didn't know that he was basically rendered mute as a kid. That's super interesting. And that's the reaction. Let me just stop that share there. That you actually want from your listener, right? Okay, let's round up this the last half of this lesson. So we are going to look at the prism method, right? So similar to a camera angle, one of the techniques that help you improve your storytelling is the prism method, right? So if you ever held a crystal prism, it's one of those things that you always see that when there's obviously like a light shining of white. So I mean, where we see obviously light is white, right? The prism will then go and reflect all the colors of the rainbow, for example, like the spectrum of colors on the other side, right? So you'll notice that each time you move it, the pattern of the rainbow colors dancing on the world, on the world of the wall will change, right? We all love prisms. They're so great. So, like you shouldn't. Well, I mean, you should go get one. It's just simple things are fascinating in life, right? So while it's the same crystal and the same light, the same wall, when you move the prism, you change your perspective on the light, and you see completely different colors and different patterns, right? So thinking of yourself as a prism through which the facts of your story will pass is a good way to really imagine the way that you approach stories at any one particular time. So there's no right or wrong way to tell a story, right? There are very wrong ways. I mean, like not telling a story at all, or just telling a rubbish story or whatever it is. But you can use the prism method to find the best way to to tell a story. How do we use the prism method? One, we are a global village, and you know that with the internet, many years ago, so about up to 24 years ago, we really, really, really like embraced the internet as I'm saying as a global community. Everyone had internet around the world, and we started really seeing the power of being able to go and look up like new things and find information and watch YouTube. Okay, YouTube only came around about what is it, 2005, right? But so much. There's so much out there, and today, obviously, in 2024, oh man, oh, like the word too much does it no justice, right? So, with a bit of information, a little luck, you can find nearly anyone and everything. So, studies show that twins often feel incomplete if separated, even if it happened when they were infants. And do you ever wonder whether twins feel like two halves of one whole? As if you are a twin, do you ever feel that you're missing your other half if being separated? This has a point, right? So if you've had a good parenting model, should you think twice about becoming a parent yourself? It's hard enough to be a good parent or partner in a relationship, but if you've never seen love modeled or watched a healthy relationship, how do you think you would actually behave as a good wife, husband, partner in a relationship? So these are questions that we can have a look at certain situations, like for example, twins, siblings like that, and look at like conversations around them, parenting, look at different conversations around parenting, relationships, connections. All these are acceptable angles which we want to use to approach a story or could use to approach a story and they all would have worked if we just built a little bit more, researched a little bit more, prepped a little bit more, and constructed a little bit better, right? So by using the prism method, you are already on your way to becoming a powerful storyteller. How do you understand this? Take one thing, for example, like parenting, and blast it out the water, right? So put it through the prism and see many different options and angles that we can actually use moving forward. Where do stories come from? It's popular belief that everyone has at least one good story to tell, at least one good story. Come on. Unfortunately, having a good story solves only one part of the challenge. The other part is to have and apply the skill. Tell the truth, make it matter, never be boring. The truth part is super important because it's a credibility thing, right? Why should I listen to you if you're lying, right? You can tell me that something that a story is made up and then tell me a great made up story, but you've got to disclaim that as the truth at the beginning of that particular interaction, right? Make it matter. Make that moment that you are telling the story matter and never, ever, ever be boring. To accomplish this, there are also three more skills to practice. The first is that if you can learn to speak visually, emotionally engage your listener, and use the power of you instead of me, we or I, you will instantly become a more powerful storyteller. You are, you will, you do, you say, you thinking, again, direct to consumer, basically, right? Stories come from anywhere. You can get stories from your peers, your clients, colleagues, work, whatever it may be, schools, studies, your own personal experiences, family, friends, yeah, so much. But by far, your biggest source of stories are going to come from whatever you experience in life. Agree? Because you were first there. I'm saying to you, it's his first contact. Excuse me. Some of the best stories or content for your material come from the real lives of people that you know and the experience that you had with them or had observing them or have had reacting to them, heard about conversation or observation or whatever it is. Try focusing your stories using the following questions. So, Jerry Hedquist has 10 questions that you should ask for or as a storyteller. Who is the story about? Personalize the story, make it about that person at the center, and make sure you tell the right parts of that centered story to get your point across. Where are we? So, the audience wants to know. Once you tell them, they could follow the story more easily. Obviously, set the scene, say that we are currently at, or you are at a soccer stadium just before the big game between the Chiefs and the Pirates, whatever it may be. You've been obviously given like a liberating, like a luxury rights or whatever it is, VIP rights to walk through like the freshly cut grass or whatever it is, and um, not cut grass, but you understand what I'm saying to you. The field needs to be must be well kept, and obviously, especially before the game as well. And walking down there with one of the soccer greats, we want to be able to tell the audience where we are, set the scene, and then we can create a great story. What's the goal? What are your protagonists, so the person that you're voting for, want to or need to accomplish, right? What do you want to change, right? What what are the dreams? Make the goal clear to your audience. Give them a reason to care about what it's all about its attainment. Okay. Number four, where's the obstacle? It doesn't always start out that way, but the journey towards the goal can be one from safety to danger, from the known to the unknown. The obstacle is the challenge, and you need to go and solve or approach or whatever it is, break down an obstacle so that this problem, dilemma, question, whatever it is answered. It's given you're giving something to that audience. You're giving a conclusion, resolution, whatever it may be, right? The conflict makes a story worth telling. If it's to a drama side or a comedy side, it doesn't matter. Like you want to be able to see like what is the process of getting through this? What is it that we're actually talking about? What do we want to get past, right? So, what's the process of overcoming the obstacle? Your audience learns the most from you or from how the protagonist, you or the person that is the hero, quote unquote, in the story, right, overcomes this particular obstacle. It's the method that teaches that particular lesson. And what did the memories that they had encountered trigger? The react to what inner demons did the protagonist face? Think little steps, right? Just get the answers to these questions and then apply them to your great story. Are you showing instead of telling? Use the active voice. Make sure that you are telling people a theater of the mind. You're using an audio platform. Let your audience reach their own conclusions too. Right. Don't tell them how to feel. Don't tell them what you think. Don't tell them the way forward as a dictator. Excuse me. Just going to get some water. And then give your audience the gift of discovery along the way. Number seven, are you keeping it interesting? The story should intrigue and engage the audience from the beginning and surprise them along the way to keep their attention. What's the emotional connection? You want your audience to care, to feel something more from the story. They've got to react to it in some other, like get angry, cry, be sad, be shocked, be entertained, laugh, whatever it is, like make them feel empowered, whatever it is, right? What's the point? What's the aha moment? So when they listen to it, they're like, oh, okay, their lives haven't been changed, but you did change the motion of their life, their current day, the current day that they're busy having. So a very cool interview with the music artist. That was very interesting, very entertaining as well. And again, great music that you're obviously promoting is a great way to have a bit of an aha moment. Oh, I like this artist. I'd like to go and listen to more of their music. I like to follow them on Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, YouTube, and go and maybe buy some of their music download from Spotify, that type of thing, right? Is there a clear call to action? So, what should the listener do to get the benefits of what you just sold to them about the story? What could the listener do to apply the insight to his or her own life? When we talk about the payoff, this is it here. The payoff is yes, sometimes we do ask a question. We do say, what would you do? What would you say? What are you thinking? If it is, like, have you ever? But also, the payoff is what the listener will walk away from that particular interaction, that experience, right, that they've had with you on air. What do they get out of it? Like the payoff, right? So storytelling doesn't require great windows of time. Commercials are some of the shortest forms of storytelling. And you can probably recall at least one 60-second spot that takes you 2 minutes to describe. And why is that? Because you want to add more information to it. Like it, then they said this, then there was this funny moment here. But then, did you know that it was selling at this particular price? I'm going to go down there. I know that there's this particular store just across the road. I'm definitely going to have a look at it, right? It's because writing short is almost harder than writing long. It's true for news, ads, and features. We know that already. But if you, excuse me, can take someone on a complete journey in 30 or 60 seconds of airtime, you're truly an adept, right? Okay, highly skilled, um, uh, trained storyteller. Jeffrey Hedquist, right, suggests that you examine every part of your station for places where storytelling could make a real difference to the brand itself, right? The bigger the story, the richer, I'm saying the richer the core of the station is centered around storytelling. Every other aspect and department is affected by that particular directive, right? Tell good stories, tell good stories, tell good stories. In how many areas are you using stories? Of course, these techniques apply in all obvious places where you need content, obviously, right? That's everywhere, as I just said, but there's a need for good storytelling everywhere. There are the key lecture points of this particular lesson. Hope you learned something. I do want to end off with one more piece from our man Paul. Let's listen in.
For over 30 years, 5 days a week, there was this thing on the radio called The Rest of the Story, just 3.5, 4 minutes long, around all over the country. Paul Harvey was the announcer. He did 2 other daily broadcasts that if you ever heard them, you will never forget them. The way he wrote, the way he sounded.
Hello, Americans. This is Paul Harvey. Stand by for news.
My first job in Chicago, making stories for NPR, my windows at the NPR Chicago Bureau looked out over a section of East Wacker Drive that was called Paul Harvey Drive, which I loved, thinking that somewhere not far from where I was sitting. Paul Harvey had been up since 3:30 in the morning, pounding out his scripts on an electric typewriter. At his height, he was on over 1,200 radio stations, which, by the way, is more stations than NPR has. Just a massive audience, 24 million. His daily show, Paul Harvey News and Comment, was the day's news delivered like brisk radio poetry, with some folksy humor or some conservative opinion. But it showed the rest of the story, is what I want to talk about today. Typical episode just jumps into the action.
Now was the winter of Ted's discontent. You could see the frustration, even the anger in his face and in his gait as he stalked down Madison Avenue that blustery morning. He had thought himself, hoped himself, a book author, a poet. But the great publishers of New York, New York, had repeatedly demonstrated the error of his ways.
I have to say, listening to Paul Harvey makes me feel like I need to go back to radio school. He just has this incredibly musical sense of timing, of when to pause, when to take the pitch of his voice up and down, which he would do like a singer, climbing up and down the scales. Listen to the way he performs the next few sentences as just one long sentence, including the dialogue.
A volume of verse? Oh, no. Verse was not selling these days anyhow. Ted's particular volume was simply too different from others in its category, and worse still, it was too fantastic.
Who sounds like that?
Sorry, they had said. 27 times. 27 respected publishing houses had perused Ted's imagined masterpiece and rejected it, and not all of them politely.
Ted had learned his lesson. He decided he's going to go home and had a plan for his manuscript.
And he was going to vent his aggravation by burning that document, a bonfire of the inanities.
Nice tip of the hat there to the title of a Tom Wolfe novel, or possibly to 15th century church history. Then, Ted runs into a guy he knew from school, Mike McClintock, there on Madison Avenue. And Mike invites him up to his office.
Well, Mike's new office, the establishment by which he had been hired only 3 hours earlier, was Vanguard Press, a publisher, and more significant, a publisher Ted had somehow overlooked. And you have guessed the rest. Ted did get published. And he got famous. And later he would marvel if I'd been going down the other side of Madison Avenue that morning, I'd be in the dry cleaning business instead. For once upon a grotesque disappointment, in the winter of 1937, following an intolerable 27 turndowns by the high priests of the publishing industry of New York, there was a little volume on the verge of incineration entitled, "And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street." And that was followed by Horton Hatches the Egg. And that was followed by How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Then came The Cat in the Hat and Green Eggs and Ham and The Lorax. Of course, you know their creator is Ted Geisel. You know him by his pen name, Dr. Seuss. Only now you know the rest of the story.
Lots of episodes of the rest of the story are like this one, about somebody who fails at something for a long time, and then there's a lucky break, and everything changes. So, for example, there's the skinny, shy, lonely kid who gets beat up till a fireman teaches him to stand and fight. And he became
the two-fisted, ultimately tough screen legend you knew as John Wayne.
Or there's the 14-year-old boy who writes to Franklin Delano Roosevelt asking for $10, who turns out to be
Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro.
Fidel Castro is actually unusual. Most of the rest of the story episodes are about white guys. I sent away for this MP3 archive of 663 episodes. 34 were women. Sometimes Paul Harvey would go historical, like when he tells the story of a practice that was banned in England and colonial America because it led to disorder in the streets, unruly mobs spilling into churches, profanity. But people would not stop doing this thing. It went underground and continues to this day.
Americans simply could not, still cannot kick the habit of observing Christmas.
I went back and listened to a bunch of these preparing this week's show, and I've wondered if you could tell the story of the rest of the story in the style of the rest of the story. Okay, here's my best shot at that. Mr. Arant was 28 years old. Concert pianist, doing great, performed with orchestras all over the world. But then he decided to make a change. Something that would be less nerve-wracking than waking up to perform. His new gig? Writing radio scripts. 5 a week for somebody else to read. They made thousands this way together. The guy on the radio got all the credit. People thought of it as his show. The person who got all the credit was Paul Harvey. Mr. Arant was in the background. And who was Mr. Arant? Well, I should tell you his full name. Paul Arant Jr. His father? Well, some people once knew him as Paul Arant, but you know him by a different name. Paul Harvey. That's right. Every episode of the rest of the story was written for Paul Harvey by his own son.
Wow.
And now you know the rest of the story.
Very cool. Very nice. So I wanted to end off with kind of like it's a well, not an autobiographical piece. I mean, that's not his life. But a great way to end off the lesson. Okay, hope you learned something new. I will see you in next week's lessons on campus.